Okay, this is from last time, and it is a cable tie gun. Cable tie tightener. What it does is, you have cable ties, it pulls them. The mechanism is actually, let's see if I can get a shot of the mechanism, because the mechanism is pretty cool. It pulls the cable tie, that little pawl comes out, pulls the cable tie, and at the very end, right here, it cuts it off. Let's take a look at that. Here's a cable tie. Put it on a hammer for the heck of it. And you pull it tight. And let's do it this way. That. And so this is slid up like so. Pulls it. Let's see if I can get it to focus. I put my hand back there. Yeah. There we go. It pulls it up tight, and then it slips. There it goes. If you have a lot of cable ties to do in your job, this could be a cool thing. Most people just pull it tight by hand and cut them off. People call them zip ties. Why did it slip? I don't know. I hardly ever use this thing. And this is an inexpensive one. Maybe the word is cheap. It has a force gauge here that you can tighten or loosen to change how tight you want your cable ties to be. So, that's it. Cable tie gun, zip tie gun. If you had to do 50 of these every day, you might want one of these, but I rarely use it because I usually put in 3 cable ties on a job, 5 cable ties. I pull them tight and I snip them off by hand. So I put a new starter in the 2008 Honda Fit. This is the old one. And my wife got to about 10 miles away from here and the car made a terrible noise, and I thought, oh no, the starter, and it stopped running. The car wouldn't run. And I thought, oh my God, the starter did something terrible, the new one. But no, that wasn't the issue. The issue is this. Front axle. The right front axle, the passenger front axle, snapped. So I've already taken the axle out. It was that point that I said, oh, let me make a video about it. So anyway, I'm going to tell you what I did, and then you'll see me put it back in. So first thing was removing, this is the link for the front stabilizer bar. And the manual says remove that. And you put a 5mm wrench in here. I believe it's 5mm to hold it, and you loosen this bolt. I had a hard time loosening this bolt. I felt like it went to a certain point and stopped, and I felt like it was going to get jammed. So what I did was, I got my Dremel tool, and with the wire wheel, and I cleaned the end of those threads really, really well, and then I slowly, while holding the center of that with the 5mm wrench, I was able to get this off, rocking it back and forth so I didn't snap that joint off. So that was a bit of a fun time. Next, I got this ball joint out. This is the lower knuckle where that ball joint goes in. You have to take this out, and Honda wants you to use a ball joint separator, which is a tool that comes in here and pushes these two apart. I think they have these at Harbor Freight or other places. They say don't bang right here with a hammer, which is what most people do, and which I've seen a lot of people do. They would rather you did not do that. There's the knuckle itself, and they would rather that didn't happen. Now the next thing I did, probably the first thing I did, was get this bolt out here, which I'll show you when we put it back in. There's a nut. Here's the nut that's on the end, and it has a little collar that's dented in. That takes the place of a cotter pin. It's dented in, and I dented that out. I got a screwdriver in there and pried that out. And then I use my rattle gun and a 32mm socket to remove that nut. Now, you might not have to take that little dent out. That rattle gun might just zip this right off without causing problems, but it also might strip the threads. But this thing should come with the new axle, a new one of these. And of course the new axle is this part right here, so it doesn't really matter if you damage it getting it off. Maybe you can, people that have done this before can comment on whether you really have to push that out. But I pushed it out and I used the rattle gun and a 32mm socket. If you don't have a rattle gun, if you don't have an impact, which is an impact wrench, and an air compressor to drive it, you could put your 32mm socket here, put a breaker bar on that socket, and maybe a piece of pipe on the breaker bar, and pull down on this counterclockwise until it breaks loose. And to do that, you're probably going to have somebody step on the brakes in the car to hold the disc so that the wheel doesn't turn. And I would say this is the first thing to do while the car is still on the ground, before you put it up in the air or on jack stands. Break that nut loose with a breaker bar or with your impact wrench. So here's the axle that came out. This is the passenger side, front. And it seems to have snapped at a very narrow point. And it seems like there's a dampener on here. I'll take this apart if I can. And that dampener maybe got loose and started to spin and actually made it narrow here, or caused corrosion, and it just failed. And so I wonder if this isn't some kind of common thing on Hondas, maybe other cars that have these dampeners. You can see it's all rusted and rotted. And I kind of think there was a rubber boot here and that made moisture, made this fail. I don't think the new one's going to have the new axle's going to have a dampener on it. And people might say, you know, let me know what you think about that. Some people say buy OEM, don't buy aftermarket. Make sure you get the original. This exact same thing happened to the other side, and I already replaced it. I should have replaced both sides. I just thought it was a sort of a freak thing that happened. Okay, once again, some Rock Auto action. Let's see. I believe I got the Cardone Select, but we'll see. Cardone Select, complete, inspected by. Okay. There's the old part, there's the new part. Visually it looks the same. Yes, they do give you a new axle nut, so you don't have to be worried about damaging this, because this is all this is replaced. You don't have to put this back on from the other one. So I had a pretty fair amount of trouble getting the splines out of this. I had to hammer pretty hard, which it says that you're supposed to hammer it. And you can see there's a fair amount of rust on these splines all the way around. And so I'm going to get in there with some kind of brush and clean out as much rust as I possibly can. Let's look at the other end that it has to go into. It's up here. Let's see if I can get a shot of it. There it is. Way back in there. I'm actually using my video cam as an inspection tool. And this looks much better. This doesn't look rusty at all, but I'll get in there and look too. Now that's the intermediary shaft. The end of the intermediary shaft. There actually is another shaft here. Here's that shaft. And here are the splines. They're external. rather than internal. And they look good, but I'll probably clean those too. Doesn't look like it's going to be as difficult. I'll lubricate everything with grease. This is the grease seal here, and it actually looks like it's in good shape, so I'm going to grease this up and put it together. I'm going to try and run the axle in this way to see if it goes in easily. Ah, look at that, slides right in. It's time for some grease. Greasing the inside of the splines. Also, this is the sealing area right here. I'm making sure that that's got a nice coat. If this seal went into the automatic trans, I would probably change the seal, but it's just going into the other shaft, the intermediary shaft, so it doesn't really, you know, nothing's going to happen in terms of it losing fluid from the transmission, because it's not at the transmission. Put a goodly amount of grease on here. I don't want a terrific amount because I don't want it to get flung off and end up on the brake rotor. So I'm making sure that it's coated, but not excessive. I think I'll do the inner first. This, now I'm going to pull this away with a bungee cord, make it easier on myself. Let's see if that works. Okay, now I'm gonna bop it with a dead blow hammer, plastic. There it goes. I think if I had to do this over again, I would use like a ratchet strap on this instead of this bungee was too weak. I think hey, she went back in. Very nice. Okay, now I'm gonna put the stabilizer link back on, which is here. Kind of at a bad angle, but we'll make sure that we will lift that into place. Put just a dab of Never Sees on there. And once again, it's pretty tight right there, so gotta be careful that I don't strip it, that I'm gentle. Let's see, 14 millimeters, I believe. Yep. Oh, you see it's pretty misaligned. I think I'm gonna get a pry bar and pry it up, because I don't want to crank on this I'd rather not crank on this to try to align it. I'd rather pry it. Yeah, that's better. See, now it's so easy that I can do it. Well, go back and forth, okay. It seems pretty good. So again, this is how you would remove it. You work that. Is it a 5mm? I think it is. 5mm wrench. Right in like that. And that's nice and tight. I don't want to over torque anything. Okay, now we have this nut here. This goes on the ball joint with a clip. The clip is in good shape, and it's not a cotter pin. It's actually a spring clip, so I'm going to reuse this. If it was a cotter pin, I probably would not reuse it. But first, I'm going to study to see how this goes on, because I'm not sure. It looks like you push it, and you just keep pushing it until it snaps in like that. And let's see. I believe it's 17mm. Yep. Haven't quite reached it yet, but that's it. A hole where the clip can go into. There's 2 holes. So there ought to be one over here. Yeah, there it is. That's it. That's not coming out of there. Putting the nut on that came with it. And I'm going to tighten it. Not using the impact gun. I'm going to tighten it by hand, and then when Gwen gets home, I'm going to have her step on the brakes. I'm going to use a torque wrench. I think it said, I'll check again, I think it said 138 foot-pounds on this. Okay, and now I'm going to use this, see if I can get it in the shot. I'm going to use this drift, there it is right there, to punch it. I'm punching the little ring into the notch here. It doesn't take much. Here's the tool for next time. What is it? What does it do? Oh, look, I have another one. I have 2 of these. Jim Dunlop and Scotty's. There's a whole lot of people that know what this is and a whole lot of people that don't. Okay, see you next time.